Okay, week 2 on the life of Peter. We're going to look at an incident in Peter's life after he'd been following Jesus for a while. And we pick up the story in Matthew 14:22. It says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw that he was walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. Peter shows us something really important here about faith. We see that faith is a lifelong exercise. Last week we saw that faith is involved in your defining moment. When you first come to Jesus, you have to put your faith in him. Faith is the act of trusting God, acting on that trust. And you obviously need to do that when you first come to him. But what Peter shows us here is that you have to do that all through life. Jesus doesn't guarantee that life is just going to be easy and there aren't going to be any more trials or difficulties in our lives. And the truth is that when you live in faith, you're going to live through it in ups and downs of everyday life. Now, sometimes that's ordinary stuff. Sometimes Jesus is calling us to exercise faith by writing a tithe check or inviting someone to church or maybe getting baptized or maybe serving at church. And sometimes it's going to be extraordinary. Some people might be called into ministry even to give up their lives for the sake of the gospel. But in either case, in the ordinary and the extraordinary, faith is a lifelong exercise. And when you think about exercise, you recognize that exercise is what allows us to continue to be strong and healthy. When your muscles don't get any exercise, they atrophy. And faith is a muscle, and you exercise faith all throughout your life. The whole Christian life is a walk of faith. Every day there are opportunities to trust God. Every day there's opportunities to step out in faith. We see what happens in the next verse. It says, but when Peter saw the wind, he was afraid and he began to sink. Now remember, he was standing out there on the water and he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? What a great picture of a second truth we learn from the story, and that doubt is a lifelong temptation, just as faith is something we're called to exercise every day of our lives in our walk with Jesus. Doubt is something that will always be there to tempt us. We're always going to be tempted to take our eyes off of Jesus and to turn our focus onto something else and to believe more in that other thing than in Jesus and his power. Now think about it. Whatever that extraordinary thing that maybe you feel God calling you to, there's going to be doubts and you're going to be tempted not to do it. Now maybe it's an ordinary thing that you recognize Christ is calling you to in your walk of faith. Again, you're going to be tempted to doubt. You're going to be tempted to take your focus off of Jesus and focus on those reasons or excuses that keep you from stepping out of the boat. Back to Matthew, we finished the story. It says, when they climbed into the boat, Jesus and Peter, the wind died down. And then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. Look at their response here after Peter steps out in faith and comes back in the boat. It never leaves them the same. In fact, what we learn through this is faith, exercising faith will rock your world. When you exercise faith, you get a clearer picture of Jesus. You see who he is. Your vision of God gets bigger and bigger as you become smaller and smaller. When's the last time you reacted or asked the question like these disciples did after they saw Jesus in action? When's the last time you looked at Jesus and said, you're awesome. I worship you, like the disciples all did. Your faith journey is only going to be boring if you make it that way. But if you exercise faith, it will rock your world and you'll begin to see Jesus more and more for who he is. And you're going to worship him more and more. Your relationship with him will grow deeper and more meaningful and more intense. And not just yours, but even the people around you. I mean, think about it. Peter was the one who got out of the boat, but look at who's worshiping him. It says that all of those in the boat worshiped him. You know, if you want people around you, your family members, your friends, your kids, your parents, your peers at school, if you want people around you to really see Jesus, maybe they're going to really see Jesus because you're stepping out and exercising your faith, whether in extraordinary or ordinary ways. The question that you have to ask today is, what step of faith do you need to take?